if your company is siloed, your customers are having a siloed experience right now. Because when they go from one part of the experience to another, it is not smooth. It does not look like the same experience. And that's because two different people built that experience, because they work in two different departments that are in charge of two different parts of the journey.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Engati Engage series. I'm your host, Jeremy D'Souza, and today we have a very interesting guest, Dan Gingiss, with us. But before we get into the interview, let's begin with a quick introduction of Engati. Engati is the world's leading multilingual, no-code chatbot platform, available across 14 channels with 25,000 bots created across 186 countries in every domain and use case. We run the Engati blog and the video channel, which receives upwards of 300,000 visitors annually. And now for our guest. Dan is the Chief Experience Officer of the Experience Maker LLC. He coaches companies on how great CX can be the best marketing. He's also a keynote speaker and experience coach with more than 20 years of professional experience at companies like McDonald's, Discover, and Human. We're really thrilled to have you here today with us, Dan.
Well, thank you, Jeremy. Glad to join you and looking forward to the conversation.
Perfect. So let's dive into this. The first question to you is that since you're an experience coach, what do you think is the one factor that most businesses fail to take into account while crafting an effective customer experience?
I think the one factor is that they don't listen to their customers. And that's sort of the irony, right? Is that we're building experiences for our customers, but we're not listening to them or taking their input into consideration, because most companies feel like they can be like Apple, which is, Apple famously has said, if we asked people what they wanted, we'd never build what we made, right? And so we know what they want, and they tend to be right about that. Amazon tends to know what we want before we want it. But for most companies, you have to talk to your customers, and the good news is that people are more than willing to share what it is they want, what they need, what they like about your business, what they don't like about your business, and you can gain so much intelligence just by talking with customers.
So it's all about, actually diving into what they want rather than trying to just magically figure it out, dream something up on your own, right?
Well, obviously the most innovative companies are going to come up with things that customers don't even know that they want. But where a lot of companies fall down is they're not even delivering a basic experience that's acceptable to their customers. And one of the things that I love to talk about is the difference between ordinary and extraordinary, because an ordinary experience is just okay. It's average. It's so-so. It's nothing that you or I are going to talk about to anybody, right? Nobody's ever said, let me tell you about the perfectly average restaurant I went to last night, right? So we have to make that move from ordinary to extraordinary. And the good news is that extraordinary does not have to be very expensive. It doesn't have to be super high end. It just has to be a little bit better than ordinary so that it's worth talking about.
Absolutely. And since you're talking about the need for an extraordinary experience, a memorable experience, would you say that the desire to create a decent, acceptable customer experience is actually what's limiting a business's potential to create a great experience, an extraordinary experience, something they're going to remember?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. You have to get the basics right first. And a lot of companies do sort of miss on that. And the advice that I would give there is, I always tell executives, or really any level of an employee, to always become an employee of your company. To always become a customer of your company. So walk through the steps that your customer walks through. If you have a sign-up process on your website, for example, when's the last time you went through that sign-up process and actually saw how easy or difficult it was? So after you've signed up for your own product, what you're going to see is what happens next from the customer's eyes, right? Do you get a welcome letter sent to you? And is that welcome letter welcoming? Do you feel good about the purchase that you've made? Or does it This is where you may notice that it has some spelling or grammar errors, or that that it's not formatted correctly. There's things that you will notice simply by going through the process. And it's amazing to me how many employees don't go through their own customer process to see what their customers see. So you got to, as you mentioned, you have to get the basics right first, and then you can start focusing on making improvements to it. But to me, part of the basics is making sure that you eliminate pain points, you eliminate problems within the journey, which again might be as simple as an email that doesn't show up formatted correctly. But that's such a bad look for your company, and it's something that's very easy to fix. It's just one of these things that you have to notice that it's actually there.
So we get rid of the negatives, the minor irritants, and then we start focusing on creating something great, right?
And again, creating something great can be just a little bit better than ordinary. The way that I teach companies is I really try to focus on simple, practical, and inexpensive, because I could give you some great ideas that'll cost you $1 million to improve your business. And you're going to look at me and say, Dan, we can't do that. We don't have that kind of money, right? So I always try to focus on things that are simple, practical, and inexpensive. And they do make a difference, because again, so many of the experiences that we have as consumers are just average, which is why we don't talk about them very much. If you think about what people share with their friends, with their family on social media, they're going to share either very, very negative experiences or very, very positive experiences. And the reason why we tend to see more negative experiences shared, especially on social media, is because that's what's out there in the universe, right? We don't, as consumers, we don't have as many positive experiences that we remember to lean on to go tell people about. And what I've seen is the research shows that people are actually more willing to share positive experiences than negative experiences. We just have to give them more positive experiences to share. That's the problem.
And I think it doesn't need to be, something extremely great per se. Even something unexpected would be something they would be really willing to share, right? Something positive and unexpected.
Yeah, something unexpected, something that's a little bit different from the norm, I think is always something that works. Instead of sending a brand new client a thank you email, send them a handwritten note, because that's just different. It doesn't really cost you anymore. It might take you a couple more seconds to hand write it, but it's so much more personal, and it's going to be much more memorable to people.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. So my next question is, what would you define as like a digital experience for a customer, and what are the digital touch points that warrant the most attention?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, when you start with if you back up a second to the definition of a customer experience, of which digital experience is a big part, it really includes every single touch point that a customer has. And one of the challenges with CX is that if any of those touch points fail, it can mean that the entire customer experience fails. And so we do have to look at each one of them and understand that our customers engaging with us across multiple channels, usually, either by their own doing or because that's how we talk to them, right? We may talk to them in our marketing through mail, through email, through television, through billboards, through social media. So they're already interacting with us on different channels because of our making. When you then get to digital, I think it becomes, typically you start talking about a website and a mobile app as the first two items. And depending on your business, they may be very different from each other. For my business, I notice that, 85 to 90% of the people that come to my site are coming on a desktop. So I don't have to be quite as mobile focused as some other companies do, where those numbers might be reversed. So that's where you want to take, your own analytics and your own statistics to understand what your customers are doing. And then you want to combine that. That's the quantitative part. You want to combine that with the qualitative part, which is what are they saying and what are they telling you that they want. But I think digital, I've spent a good part of my career on website experience. And what's amazing to me is how small changes can make such a big impact on the digital experience. I'll give you a great example. When I worked for Discover, which is a credit card company in the US, one of the things that we noticed from the analytics was that the number one reason people were coming to the website was because they wanted to see their most recent transactions. They wanted to make sure that the restaurant didn't overcharge them or whatever it was. But we were making it kind of difficult to get to those transactions. It was 2 or 3 clicks that you needed to make in order to get to them. And in fact, some other big banks even today make it so difficult to figure out where the transactions are because it doesn't use the word transactions, or the menu items aren't clear on where to go. So what we did was we built a feed, kind of like a Facebook feed, right on the homepage where we showed the last 10 transactions. So the minute you logged in, it was the first thing that you saw. And what was remarkable is the very next day, all of the metrics on the website changed, and 2 things really stood out. The first is what you probably call bounce rate, which is generally looked at as a negative attribute. It has to do with people landing on your site and then leaving. Well, our bounce rate went through the roof. And we realized that was actually awesome because it meant that people were coming to the site, they were getting exactly what they wanted, and then they were leaving. Because let's be honest, who wants to spend more time than they need to on a credit card website? Nobody, right? You want to come in, get what you're looking for, and you want to leave. And it took a company like Discover to realize, wait a second, all we've been doing all this time is standing in the way of that because we want to give them a pop-up ad and we want to try to sell them on something else. And we don't want them to look at their transactions. We want them to look at what we want them to look at. And when you pull all that away and you just give people what they want, they logged in, they saw their transactions, and they logged off. The other thing, however, that we saw was immediately our customer satisfaction scores went way, way up because we were giving people the experience that they wanted. And they were happy with us. They were loyal. And that meant they continued using the card and they continued being loyal to the company. So it takes the ability to stop, to look at the analytics and say, okay, if people are going this direction in our site, because people are going to figure out how to get where they want to go, even if you make it difficult for them. Right? They're gonna figure out their own path, but you have the analytics to look at that path and figure out how to make it easier. So I always give the advice: if you have 3 clicks to get to a path today, you got to figure out how to make it 2 clicks. If you have 2 clicks today, you got to figure out how to make it 1 click. And at Discover, we figured out how to make it 0 clicks because we just popped it on the homepage when you logged in, and that really, really made people a lot happier and more satisfied.
Right, and that's the first thing they even had to see over there.
Yeah.
So it's really hard for a lot of people to take the effort to search through your entire website for information. What do you think about chatbots being able to get a query from them directly and give them an answer, which is exactly the answer they need? They don't need to spend hours and hours digging through your entire website to find what you need.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you said that because I meant to say in the last question that another piece of analytics you can look at is what are people searching for on your site, right? If they're searching for things on your site, that's a pretty good indication that they can't find what they're looking for, right? And so those are the things that you need to consider. Hey, maybe we need to make those easier to find. Maybe we need to change the navigation. Maybe we need to bring it to the homepage, whatever it is. But those on-site searches give you tons of information about what people are trying to do on your site. When it comes to chatbots, I do think that chatbots can be very useful in this scenario that you just explained, which is essentially that the chatbot has all the answers the customer needs, and the customer really just has to ask for it, and the chatbot can deliver it. I think that's absolutely fine. Where chatbots run into trouble is when my question can't be answered on the website and when I need to actually talk to a human, and the chatbot won't let go, right? They won't let me talk to a human. It's like the old telephone days where, you get this long phone tree and press 1 for this and press 2 for that. And you're like, no, I just want to talk to somebody. And it's hard to do, right? So we don't want to recreate the bad phone experience on our website or our mobile app. But I actually believe that one of the best use cases for artificial intelligence going forward is going to be to help human agents become better human agents. Because if you think about it, when you ask a question to a human agent on any channel, the first thing they have to do is go look up the answer most of the time, right? I mean, they may know the answer, but a lot of times they're going to have to go look in some system. And that takes time. And that's why whenever we call someone, we can hear clack, 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 clack on the keyboard as they're searching up things, right? Well, imagine if that agent was sitting next to IBM's Watson, and Watson just gave the agent the answer to any question in the entire world because it knows everything and wins at Jeopardy. Now that agent doesn't have to be replaced, but the agent can actually do what an agent can do better than a chatbot, which is have a human relationship with somebody. And since especially right now and today and what's going on in the world, people are craving human interaction. I think that's really critical that as companies we can provide a real human relationship to our customers, and a chatbot can't do that and probably is never going to be able to do that. So use them, but use them carefully, and don't think that a chatbot means you get to fire your entire customer service department.
So essentially a chatbot is more of a supplement to a human. So what do you think about a bot which can say, hey, I can understand this question. I can't understand what he's asking me here, so let me just send him directly to a human agent. You don't need to ask for an agent. They'll just directly send you over to an agent which can chat with you live.
Yeah, I think that's exactly how it should work. The chatbot should know, in other words, the chatbot should know its own limitations. If it knows the answer to the question, fantastic, because that is a better experience for the customer, right? They get the answer faster and they can move on, on their way. Because again, let's face it, and I don't mean to offend anybody. I just try to tell it like it is. No customer wants to sit in a chat room with a bot or an agent longer than they have to, right? We come in, we want the answer to our question, we want to leave as soon as possible. Like, this is not a pastime for us. This is not something like where you're like, yay, I get to call customer service. We want it to be fast. So if the chatbot can deliver me the answer and I can be on my way, outstanding. That's a great experience. If the chatbot also knows immediately that it doesn't know the answer and therefore needs to bring a human in, that is also a great experience. But I had an experience once where, just to give you an example, I got stuck in the chatbot. The chatbot didn't know what to do, and it gave me three choices. Neither of the three choices were what I wanted. So I asked for help, and it said, would you like to talk to somebody in customer service? And I said, yes. And then the very next thing it said was, well, customer service is closed. And I'm like, well, then why did you ask me if I wanted to talk to somebody in customer service, right? And then the funny thing is that immediately after that, a live customer service agent joined the conversation, even though apparently customer service was closed. And believe it or not, the next thing I typed in, both the agent and the bot answered. So it just became a complete mess, right? And that's what we have to watch out for, is that you can be humming along and having a really nice, easy, fast experience, and then the whole thing blows up. And unfortunately, that's what part of that do you think I remember the most, right? I remember the part where it blew up. And unfortunately, that's how customers think.
Makes sense. So other than just customer experience in general, how do you think AI and, well, all sorts of modern technology can help businesses, well, in helping them generate better experiences, providing better service, basically helping the customers and clients all around?
Yeah, well, I think it starts with the fact that we have so much data today that we can't possibly crunch it all in our brains. And I do think that this is where AI and machine learning have really come in and played a big role. I mean, if you just think about, for an average size company, just the conversation that happens in social media it's almost impossible to keep track of all of it, let alone if you want to be looking at your competition, the rest of your industry, other companies that you look up to. There's just so much information. Then you take all of the data that we get from people on our websites and on our mobile apps and in our shopping carts and our e-commerce sites and all that. And it's, what companies have gotten really good at is putting together reports, but reports don't help you improve the experience. They don't help you take action. They just sort of inform you where you are. And I think that artificial intelligence can really start to help take all of this data from multiple parts, from multiple points, and say, hey, we're hearing this over here in social media. This is what people are saying. We're seeing this on our website. This is what people are doing. If we put these two things together, the right answer is this, right? And you take what people are saying, take what people are doing, you put it together, and now you've got the answer on what to do next. And to me, it's the quantity, just the mass volume of data that we have on every single customer that we just can't. You can't make. There's not enough reports in the world that you can put on my desk that are going to help me make a decision. And I do think this is where we need computer assistance.
So yeah, I like that you said that, because instead of forcing a person to sit and spend X number of hours trying to understand data, numbers, you can just get AI to tell you, this is what I've interpreted from this is what I've observed, and you can make a decision based on this.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so much, and so now you use those hours to actually execute something, to take action, right? Which is a better use of the time.
More productive then.
Yep.
So another question, and this is not exactly CX related, but since you were in the marketing, how are brands leveraging video marketing today? Is it still in an adolescent stage? Should more of them be trying it out at this point?
Yeah, I think video marketing is still very early days for most companies. I think where I'm seeing most of it is with entrepreneurs or solopreneurs like me. Will use it a lot more than bigger companies. There's a couple of challenges. I think the first is scale. It is difficult to scale video, although there's some great examples. There's a company out of I think it's the UK called BT. It's a cable company, and they've created an explainer video, because when you get your first bill, it's always a little bit more expensive. It's got these installation fees. It's got like a half of a month plus a full month. It's a very confusing bill. And so they built a video that explains the bill. But what they've done that's really remarkable is they've incorporated in every customer's actual bill into the video. So it's a personalized video. So Jeremy, your video shows that the actors in the video, it's the same actors as I see, except when they take the piece of paper and they show it to you, it's your bill and it's got your numbers on it. And it's like, wow, that's super cool. And this video was made for me. Right. And that's one of the first examples I've seen of actually scaling video marketing, which I think is really cool. Otherwise, it's just a television commercial, right, which we've been doing for years. But I would say that my advice to companies is look for ways where you have an excuse to have a more personal engagement with a customer. It might be, again, we talked about sending a thank you note, an email versus a handwritten card. It also could be a video, right? Hey, Jeremy, thank you so much. It was great to be on your show. I really appreciate it. It's a lot more meaningful when I send it in a video format. What are some other parts across our journey where we might want to talk to a customer and be face to face, or at least produce a one-way video that's personalized to kind of, as we mentioned before, create that human engagement. So the scaling part's challenging, but I do think it's very valuable, and I do think we're still in early stages with it.
I like how you tied that in about the bills, because in my opinion, that's one of those novel ways in which you could actually do something unique, something fun, and create a cool customer experience, which is memorable. You remember it.
Yeah, and it's what's great about it is that it's acknowledging, hey, there's a part of our process that's a little bit complicated. We know it's complicated, right? You don't think the airlines know that their policies are complicated? Of course they do, right? But the question is, are they explaining it in a way that is going to cause people to understand it and not to have to call customer service because they didn't get it, right? They didn't read the fine print or whatever it is. And I think this cable company, look, a better answer would be don't make it complicated in the first place, right? But the way that the cable company is set up, they've got to charge you for, the remainder of this month and all of next month all at once. And that's a one-time thing. And it's a little confusing. So they've done a really nice job explaining it. Well, one of the things that's related to that I always try to teach people is when we look at all of our communication in any format, look for places where you're using industry jargon or where you're using acronyms or you're using words that frankly your customers do not understand. And I've written about both the financial services industry and the healthcare industry that still, even though all the research shows that customers do not understand the terminology, they still continue to use the same terminology, which is just baffling to me.
Even lawyers.
Lawyers are great at it too, right? Lawyers are great at it. In fact, I love sharing an example, a legal example from a Malaysian company called iFlix. And iFlix is like a Netflix competitor that's out of Malaysia. And I think they service most of Asia. Well, like many corporations, iFlix has a little disclaimer at the bottom of their corporate emails. When they send out a corporate email, it says, if you're the unintended recipient of this email, you need to delete it and not tell anyone and whatever. Well, their disclaimer starts in all capital letters with the words covering our butts. Now, when you see that, the first thing that happens is you laugh. And the second thing is you keep reading, right? Which is exactly what the lawyers want. They want you to read this disclaimer, but whoever reads the disclaimer, and of course, when you read the rest of their disclaimer, it's hilarious. And you can tell that it was written by a lawyer and a marketer together, or a lawyer and a comedian, maybe. But it was done in such a way that even a part of the experience that is normally boring or unmemorable becomes memorable. And that, if we go back to the making ordinary extraordinary, it's a great example of that.
Even Velcro has done something along these lines with, the whole don't call it Velcro campaign, call it hook and loop. They made they made it hilarious.
Yeah, exactly. And that's so much better than an angry cease and desist letter from a lawyer, right? It's gonna make it much more memorable.
Absolutely. So is there any other advice that you'd like to leave our entire audience with?
Well, I think that besides from always becoming your own customer, which is my number one piece of advice, I would also say that the hardest thing to do as a business is to look at the entire customer journey at once, to look at it from the view from the airplane, right? From 30, 40,000 feet up in the air that you can see everything. And so many companies are siloed in their organization that we can't get out of the silo when we look at the customer experience. And what I'd leave you with is, if your company is siloed, your customers are having a siloed experience right now, because when they go from one part of the experience to another, it is not smooth. It does not look like the same experience. And that's because two different people built that experience, because they work in two different departments that are in charge of two different parts of the journey. And so the way to solve that is to have somebody who's in charge of looking at everything at once, at the whole journey and all of those handoffs. If you're in a B2B company, one of the worst handoffs is when we go from a salesperson to an account manager. Think about it. The salesperson is the person that we fell in love with because it's the person we decided to give our money to, right? They were a good salesperson. We liked them. People buy from people that they like. And then what does that salesperson do? As soon as we write them a check, they say, I'm out of here. Now you're working with somebody else. And it's like, wait a second, I don't want to work with somebody else. I want to work with you. And so that's a great example of a very typical handoff that does not put the customer at the center of the experience. It puts the company, because that salesperson's being told, great, you made the sale, now go make another sale. And what they should be told is, great, you made the sale, now make sure that this customer has a smooth transition and does not have buyer's remorse and becomes loyal to us for years and years. That's what they should be doing next, but instead they're told, go sell again. And it's a big mistake.
So, uncomplicating things is probably the most important thing. And I think I even wrote about this in an ebook which I wrote for Engati on customer experience, where Disney noticed that their lines to get into Disneyland was horrible. So they actually came out with the Magic Band. So you book it online, you have everything pre-decided, and you can skip lines with that. It was probably something that solved a lot of problems were there.
Well, and that's the technological part. But what they did, when I was a kid, before all this technology came out, was they put up TV screens and they played cartoons. So at least while you were waiting in line, it didn't feel like you were waiting in line, right? And that was sort of the less technological solution, but but still a good solution, right? So lines are we've talked about lines on our podcast a number of times, and people hate standing in line. So what can you do to either make the line shorter, or which is the magic band example, or to make it not feel like you're standing in line, which is the television example, or somehow entertaining people while they're waiting.
Also, them having the cast interacting with the people as Mickey, as Minnie.
Yeah.
Keeping the kids entertained rather than having them tug at their parents.
Exactly. You got it.
So anyway, this has been a really amazing conversation. We'd love to have, another collaboration with you at some point in the future. And for the audience, Engati Engage will be back very soon with another expert and another episode. So stay tuned.